The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when the formation began at Forward Operating Base Redstone. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen stood in the rear rank, his desert tan uniform blending with 200 others. Nothing about him drew attention. Average height, lean build, quiet demeanor. He carried his rifle with the same practiced ease as everyone else, his boots worn but polished, his gear squared away without fanfare. To the infantry platoons that dominated the base, Chen was just another communications specialist. A wire dog. Someone who fixed radios and ran cable while real soldiers did real work. The kind of guy you'd pass without a second glance in the chow hall. The kind whose name you'd forget 5 minutes after hearing it. But there was something off about Chen, something the loudest voices never noticed. It showed in small ways. The way his eyes tracked movement across the compound with mathematical precision. The way he positioned himself in any room with clear sight lines to exits. The way his hands, when relaxed, fell into a ready position that wasn't quite standard army. Sergeant Tyler Voss was the first to single him out. Voss ran 3rd Platoon, a combat veteran with 2 deployments and an ego that filled every space he entered. He'd noticed Chen during morning PT, watching the communications specialist complete the run without breaking a sweat while half the infantry struggled. It bothered him for reasons he couldn't articulate. That afternoon in the motor pool, Voss gathered his usual crew. They leaned against a tactical vehicle, watching Chen check inventory on a pallet of communication equipment. The sight of a soldier with a clipboard instead of a weapon always drew their mockery. "Hey Chen," Voss called out, voice dripping with false friendliness. "When you gonna stop playing with your toys and learn some real soldier skills?" Laughter rippled through the group. Chen didn't look up. His pen kept moving across the inventory sheet, checking SE. Real numbers against the manifest. The silence only encouraged them. "I'm serious, man. When's the last time you even qualified on your rifle? They got ranges for people like you, probably use those little pop-up targets for kids." More laughter. This time louder. Chen finished his count, made a notation, and moved to the next pallet. His expression never changed. No anger, no embarrassment, just focused attention on the task at hand. "Yo, is this guy ignoring us?" Another soldier chimed in. "Chen, you deaf or just scared?" Still nothing. Chen knelt beside a communications radio, examining the serial number plate with careful attention. His fingers traced the numbers, then recorded them with precise handwriting. Voss pushed off from the vehicle and walked closer. He stood directly in Chen's light, casting a shadow across the equipment. "You know what your problem is? You hide behind paperwork because you can't handle the real shit. Bet you've never even seen combat." Chen stood slowly, clipboard still in hand. When he met Voss's eyes, there was something there that made the sergeant pause for just a fraction of a second. Something cold and distant that didn't match the mild-mannered communication specialist everyone assumed he was. "Is there something you need, Sergeant?" Chen's voice was quiet, almost polite. Voss recovered quickly, turning the moment into theater for his audience. "Yeah, I need you to grow a spine. Maybe try acting like a soldier instead of a secretary." The group erupted in laughter again. Chen held Voss's gaze for 3 seconds longer than comfortable, then returned to his inventory without another word. As Voss walked away, convinced of his victory, he missed the subtle detail that would have changed everything. On Chen's right forearm, partially hidden by his rolled sleeve, was a small tattoo. Not the usual skull or motto or patriotic symbol. Just 3 simple numbers in black ink. 176. To most, it meant nothing. To those who knew, it meant everything. That evening in the chow hall, Chen sat alone at a corner table. It wasn't isolation born of rejection. It was choice. He ate methodically, his back to the wall, eyes occasionally scanning the room with the practiced awareness of someone who'd learned to read danger in crowded spaces. 2 tables over, Voss held court with his platoon, voice carrying across the hall. I'm telling you, Chen's probably never been outside the wire. Probably spends his whole deployment in the TOC playing on computers. Someone said he's been here 6 months and never volunteers for missions, another soldier added. Just hides in the comm shop. Chen finished his meal without reaction. He disposed of his tray, nodded to the staff working the line, and disappeared into the darkness outside. No one noticed him leave. No one cared. What they didn't know was that Chen had been outside the wire 43 times in those 6 months. That his primary job had nothing to do with fixing radios. That the mild-mannered communications specialist was a carefully maintained cover for something else entirely. The truth lived in the tattoo. 176. The number wasn't random. It was a count. Before you go any further, make sure you're subscribed to the Final Watch. We bring you the stories that matter, the ones that show who people really are when everything's on the line. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us. The pattern continued for weeks. Voss and his crew made Chen their favorite target. They mocked his quiet nature, his solitary habits, the way he seemed content to fade into the background. In the motor pool, they'd imitate his careful inventory checks with exaggerated feminine gestures. In formation, they'd whisper just loud enough for others to hear about the communication specialist who couldn't hack it with real infantry. Chen never responded. Never defended himself. Never showed a crack in the comm exterior. But others started noticing details. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison was the first. She was the newest platoon leader, sharp-eyed and less interested in base politics than in understanding her soldiers. During a routine inspection of the communications facility, she watched Chen work. His hands moved across radio components with surgical precision. When he explained a technical issue, his language was exact, professional, devoid of unnecessary words. "How long have you been doing this, Chen?" she asked. "Communications?" "About 8 years, ma'am." "All Army?" He hesitated for just a moment. "Different branches. Different specialties." There was something in that pause, in the careful way he chose his words. Morrison made a mental note but didn't press. Later that week, she saw him in the base gym at 0400. She'd come early to avoid the crowds, but Chen was already there, moving through a workout routine that didn't match any Army physical training program she recognized. His movements were fluid, efficient, combining elements of combat conditioning with something more specialized. She watched from the doorway as he transitioned from weights to a heavy bag, his strikes precise and devastatingly fast. Not the wild swinging of someone working out aggression, but the controlled violence of extensive training. When he finished and noticed her watching, his expression didn't change. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning. That's an interesting routine. Keeps me ready." "Ready for what?" Chen grabbed his towel and water bottle. "Whatever comes, ma'am." He left before she could ask anything else, but Morrison's curiosity was fully engaged now. She started paying closer attention. The next clue came from an unexpected source. A supply convoy had been hit 30 kilometers outside the base. Nothing catastrophic, just an IED that disabled the lead vehicle and sent everyone scrambling for cover. The quick reaction force rolled out immediately, Voss's platoon among them. When they arrived at the scene, they found the convoy already secured. The soldiers had established a defensive perimeter, treated their wounded, and begun recovery operations. Standing in the center of it all, calmly coordinating on a radio, was Marcus Chen. Voss climbed out of his vehicle, confused. "Chen? What the hell are you doing here?" Chen finished his radio transmission before acknowledging the sergeant. Communication equipment needed installation on the convoy vehicles. "I was the technician assigned." "You were in the blast?" 50 meters away when it detonated. Voss looked around at the organized perimeter, the comm soldiers, the efficient response. Who set all this up? I made some suggestions while we waited for QRF. The convoy commander, a grizzled staff sergeant named Rodriguez, overheard and approached. Suggestions? He took command soon as the shooting stopped. Had us in fighting positions, casualties triaged, and security established before I even got my bearings back. Voss stared at Chen, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. The communications specialist stood there, dust-covered and calm, looking exactly like someone who'd done this 100 times before. They teach you that in radio school? Voss asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Chen's expression remained neutral. They teach a lot of things, Sergeant. The ride back to base was quiet. Voss kept glancing at Chen, trying to reconcile the mild-mannered technician with the soldier who'd taken control of a combat situation without hesitation. Something didn't add up. That night, Voss asked around. He talked to soldiers who'd deployed with Chen before, trying to find information. Most knew nothing. A few mentioned that Chen kept to himself, did his job well, never caused problems. But one specialist, a veteran with 3 deployments, gave Voss a strange look when he asked. "You really don't know?" the specialist said. "Don't know what?" "Where Chen came from before this?" "Communication school, I assume." The specialist shook his head slowly. "Man, you should probably leave that alone. Some things aren't your business." The warning only intensified Voss's curiosity. He tried accessing Chen's personnel file through official channels, but hit a wall. Large portions were redacted. His previous assignments were listed as classified. His training records showed standard communications courses, but gaps in the timeline suggested other schools, other qualifications never recorded in the visible portions of his file. Voss brought his concerns to Captain Williams, the company commander. Williams was a pragmatic officer, more interested in results than drama, but he listened to Voss's observations. "Sir, something's off about Chen. His file's mostly redacted. He handles combat situations like special operations. The way he moves, the way he thinks, it doesn't match his MOS." Williams leaned back in his chair. "Sergeant Voss, has Chen failed to perform any assigned duty?" "No, sir, but, has he violated any regulation or order?" "Not that I know of, but, then I suggest you focus on your own platoon and let Chen do his job." Williams's tone made it clear the discussion was over. But as Voss left, the captain added one more thing. "Some soldiers have pasts that are need to know." "You don't need to know." The comment only deepened the mystery. The base settled into its routine over the following weeks, but the dynamic had shifted. Voss's mockery became less frequent, more cautious. Others who joined in the ridicule now watched Chen with uncertain eyes. The quiet communication specialist remained unchanged, going about his duties with the same unflappable calm. Then the situation evolved in a way no one expected. A joint operation was announced. A Navy SEAL team would be passing through the base for a classified mission, using Redstone as a staging point. Security increased. Access became restricted. Speculation ran wild through the ranks about what kind of operation required SEAL support. The SEALs arrived before dawn, their convoy appearing like ghosts in the desert darkness. They moved with the silent efficiency of elite warriors, each motion economical and purposeful. Their commander was a legend in special operations circles, a man named Jack Cordero who'd served for over 20 years in the most dangerous places on Earth. Chen was working in the communications facility when the SEALs set up their Tactical Operations Center. He'd been assigned to provide technical support, ensuring their secure communications integrated with the base systems. He worked quietly in the corner, running cables and configuring encryption devices while the operators prepared their mission brief. Cordero entered the room, flanked by his team sergeant. He was scanning the space, checking security measures, when his eyes landed on Chen. The SEAL commander froze mid-step. His expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession: surprise, recognition, something deeper that looked like respect mixed with old pain. Chen looked up from his work. For 3 seconds, the two men stared at each other across the room. Then Cordero did something that made every person present question their understanding of military hierarchy. He came to attention and saluted. Not the casual salute of routine military courtesy. A crisp, formal salute held with absolute precision. The kind reserved for the highest honors. Chen slowly stood, confusion flickering across his features for the first time since anyone had known him. He returned the salute, his movements automatic despite his evident uncertainty about what was happening. Cordero held the salute for a full 5 seconds before dropping his hand. When he spoke, his voice carried across the silent room. "It's good to see you alive, Chen." "You too, sir." The SEAL commander turned to his team sergeant. "Everyone out. I need the room." The operators filed out without question. The base personnel followed, including Voss, who'd been observing from the doorway. In seconds, only Cordero and Chen remained. Through the window, Voss watched them talk. He couldn't hear the words, but the body language told a story. Cordero's posture showed deference, respect, even though he outranked Chen by multiple grades. Chen's responses were measured, reluctant, as if discussing something he'd hoped to leave buried. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, Cordero shook Chen's hand with both of his, the gesture heavy with significance. As the SEAL commander exited, Voss intercepted him. "Sir, can I ask what that was about?" Cordero studied Voss with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent a lifetime evaluating people under pressure. "What do you know about Staff Sergeant Chen?" "Just that he's a communications specialist. Keeps to himself. Does his job. That's all? His file's mostly redacted. I've been trying to figure out why." Cordero glanced back toward the communications facility where Chen had returned to his work. When he looked at Voss again, his expression was serious. 3 years ago, my team got compromised deep in enemy territory. We were 12 hours from extraction, surrounded by hostiles, completely cut off from support. We had one chance, a narrow window to move through terrain we didn't know, using intelligence we couldn't verify. He paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. Command sent us one asset. A single operator who infiltrated the area, gathered real-time intelligence, and guided us through enemy positions we never would have spotted on our own. He stayed behind enemy lines for 18 hours providing overwatch, calling in strikes, redirecting our movement. When we finally got to the extraction point, he was there waiting, having secured the LZ alone against a hostile force. Voss felt his stomach tighten. Chen. His tattoo. 176. That's not decoration. That's his count. Count of what? Cordero's voice dropped lower. Confirmed enemy kills. All close range. All during operations most people will never hear about. The revelation hit Voss like a physical blow. All the mockery, all the assumptions, all the casual dismissal of the quiet communications specialist flooded back with nauseating clarity. Why is he here? Voss managed to ask. Why is he fixing radios? Because that's what he chose after the last mission went wrong. He lost his entire team, was the only survivor. The operations took something from him, and he requested reassignment to a support role. Command granted it because you don't say no to someone who's given what he's given. Cordero stepped closer, his voice hardening. That man has done more for this country in single nights than most soldiers do in entire careers. He's earned the right to be whoever he wants to be now. So I suggest you and everyone else on this base treat him with the respect he's due, whether he wants it or not. With that, Cordero walked away, leaving Voss standing alone with the weight of his ignorance crushing down on him. Word spread through the base like wildfire. Soldiers who'd mocked Chen now avoided eye contact when they passed him. The jokes died completely. The motor pool grew quiet when he conducted inventory. In the chow hall, chairs at his table remained empty, not from disdain but from a respect that bordered on reverence. Chen seemed uncomfortable with the change. He went about his duties with the same quiet efficiency, but there was a tension in his shoulders now, as if the exposure of his past had stripped away a protection he'd relied on. Lieutenant Morrison finally approached him one evening in the communications facility. "How are you holding up?" Chen didn't look up from the radio he was repairing. "Fine, ma'am." "It's okay to not be fine." His hands stopped moving. For a long moment, he stared at the components spread across his workbench. "I chose this, ma'am. I chose the quiet. The routine. I earned that choice." "You did. And you still have it." Chen looked at her then, and Morrison saw something raw in his eyes. Grief, exhaustion, the weight of things done and witnessed that couldn't be undone or forgotten. "I'm just a communications specialist now. That's all I want to be." Morrison nodded slowly. "Understood. For what it's worth, you're the best communications specialist I've ever seen." The smallest hint of a smile touched Chen's face, then vanished. "Thank you, ma'am." She left him to his work, but made a point of ensuring the word got out. Chen wanted to be left alone. His past was his business. Anyone who couldn't respect that would answer to her. Voss struggled with the revelation more than most. The guilt ate at him, turning his swagger into something hollow. He'd built his identity on being a warrior, on his combat experience and infantry credentials. Now he realized he'd been mocking someone who operated on a level he couldn't comprehend. One evening, he found Chen in the gym again, going through the same precise routine. Voss waited until the communications specialist finished, then approached. "Chen. Got a minute?" Chen toweled off, his expression guarded. "What do you need, Sergeant?" "I need to apologize. For everything. The comments, the disrespect, all of it. I was wrong." Chen studied him for a moment. "Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else is there?" "You apologized. I accept. We move on." Voss shook his head. "How are you so calm about it? After everything you've done, everything you've been through, how do you just let it go?" Chen's jaw tightened slightly. "Because hold ing onto it doesn't help anyone. What's done is done. You didn't know. Now you do. That's enough." "But, Sergeant Voss." Chen's voice remained quiet but carried an edge of finality. "I chose this life because the other one broke me. Every time someone thanks me for my service, every time someone salutes or shows respect for things I did, it brings it all back. The operations, the kills, the friends I couldn't save. I don't want to be that person anymore. I just want to fix radios, do my job, and get through each day. Can you understand that?" Voss nodded slowly, finally grasping the full picture. The quiet wasn't weakness. It was survival. "I understand." "Good. Then help me by treating me like you would any other communications specialist. No special treatment. No kid gloves. Just normal." They shook hands, and something settled between them. Not quite friendship, but mutual understanding. Over the following months, life at Forward Operating Base Redstone found a new equilibrium. Chen remained the quiet communications specialist, and most soldiers honored his wish to be treated normally. But everyone moved a little more carefully around him now, spoke a little more thoughtfully, recognized that strength came in many forms. The tattoo on his arm, those 3 simple numbers, became a reminder. Not everyone who's fought is fighting. Not everyone who's capable needs to prove it. And the quietest person in the room might be carrying the heaviest burden. Chen never told his full story. He never listed his operations or detailed his missions. He simply continued his work with the same steady dedication, finding peace in the routine he'd chosen. When people thanked him for his service now, he just nodded and returned to whatever task was at hand. The final watch means bearing witness to stories like these, to the truth that hides behind assumptions and the strength that speaks in silence. These are the stories that matter. The ones that remind us to look deeper, to respect the quiet, to understand that heroism doesn't always announce itself. It sometimes just fixes radios and wants to be left alone. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen taught Forward Operating Base Redstone an invaluable lesson without saying a word. True warriors don't need to prove themselves. They already know who they are.